I had spent 6 glorious years without hearing my mother's voice, my father's lectures, my brother's excuses, or my aunt's endless conspiracy theories about government mind readers disguised as vacuum cleaners. 6 peaceful years. In that time I had crossed 3 star systems, designed navigation cores for the Interstellar Engineering Corps, bought a quiet apartment overlooking the blue oceans of Nova Terra, and somehow managed to convince myself that my family existed only as embarrassing memories. Then my communicator exploded. I wasn't exaggerating. The vibration was so violent that it bounced off my bedside table, smacked into the wall, and landed face down on the floor with the determination of a dying robot. Still half asleep, I picked it up. 89 missed calls. I blinked. Then I rubbed my eyes. Still 89. 37 voicemails. 142 text messages. 23 video requests. 4 emergency notifications. I stared at the screen. Only one thought crossed my mind. Someone's dead. I sighed heavily and muttered. Grandpa finally punched death in the face and lost. I tapped the newest voicemail. Instead of crying, my sister screamed loud enough to wake every neighbor in the building. Answer your phone! Grandma ran away with an alien magician! Silence. What? I replayed it. Same sentence. I checked whether I'd accidentally opened a comedy podcast. No. It was definitely my sister. Another voicemail. Dad. Son, listen, don't ask questions, just call us. Immediately. That was somehow even more terrifying. Dad hated saying, don't ask questions. Another message. Mom sounded exhausted. Please call us. Your grandmother, she's in love. I frowned. Grandma was 82. Love wasn't impossible. But judging from the panic, she'd apparently chosen love in the most inconvenient way imaginable. I finally answered the 91st incoming call. Before I could say hello, 6 different people began shouting over each other. She's been kidnapped. No, she eloped. He's after her retirement money. He's an alien prince. He hypnotized her. He's a magician. I pulled the communicator away from my ear. I can literally hear everyone at once. Nobody stopped. Finally I yelled. One person! Silence. Then my youngest cousin whispered dramatically. Grandma married a space wizard. She didn't marry him, my brother shouted. They're engaged. Mom corrected. They're fugitives. Dad barked. They're adorable. My aunt sighed dreamily. I closed my eyes. This was exactly why I had left 6 years ago. Every family conversation somehow became louder, stranger, and less believable than the previous one. I've been gone 6 years, I said calmly. Why are you calling me? Nobody answered immediately. Then Mom spoke softly. Because she listed you as her emergency contact. I nearly dropped the communicator. Excuse me? Dad cleared his throat. When she boarded the Celestial Paradise cruise, they asked for emergency information. And? She wrote your name. My name. Yes. The grandson she hasn't spoken to in 6 years? Mom hesitated. Apparently she always kept your number. I leaned back into my chair. That was unexpected. When I'd walked away from my family, I assumed everyone had erased me from their lives. Apparently Grandma hadn't. Dad continued. The cruise company contacted you first. They couldn't reach me because I silence unknown numbers. So they contacted us. I laughed once. Short. Dry. I ignore my family so efficiently that even emergencies get delayed. Nobody laughed. That worried me. So, I asked, who exactly is this magician? The room erupted again. A criminal. A performer. A scam artist. A celebrity. A billionaire. A romantic. I pinched the bridge of my nose. One answer. My cousin finally pulled up a holographic profile. His image floated above my communicator. Tall. Blue skin. Silver hair. golden eyes. An expensive white performance suit sparkling with tiny stars. He looked less like a criminal and more like someone who sold expensive perfume. His name was Orion Valeries. Age: 29. Occupation: professional illusionist aboard luxury interstellar cruise liners. Awards: too many to count. Fan clubs: millions. I stared. Grandma had somehow run away with the galaxy's most famous magician. Seriously? Dad groaned. Exactly. Mom sounded horrified. He's 53 years younger than she is. Aunt Linda interrupted. Age is just a number. Dad shouted. So is prison time. They aren't related. Aunt Linda fired back. I know they aren't related. The argument somehow evolved into whether aliens aged differently, whether magicians paid taxes, and whether cruise ships encouraged romance as part of vacation packages. I muted the call. Peace. Blessed silence. Then another message arrived. This one wasn't from my family. It came from the cruise company. Attached was security footage. Curiosity defeated common sense. I opened it. The recording showed Grandma walking confidently through the terminal in a bright red dress I'd never seen before. She looked happy. Not confused. Not frightened. Happy. Then Orion appeared. Instead of sweeping her off her feet like some dramatic romance holofilm, he simply offered his arm. Grandma smiled. She poked him in the ribs. He laughed. She stole his fancy magician's hat. He pretended to panic. She ran. He chased her. Both of them laughed like children. The surrounding passengers actually applauded. One elderly alien even wiped away a tear. Grandma finally returned the hat. Orion bowed dramatically. Then, to my complete disbelief, she smacked him playfully with her purse before taking his hand. The two disappeared onto a private shuttle together. The footage ended. I watched it again. No fear. No manipulation. No kidnapping. Just two ridiculous people acting like teenagers. Another notification appeared. A handwritten holographic letter. Grandma's voice played automatically. My favorite grandson, if you're seeing this, your family has probably turned my vacation into a galaxy-wide emergency. I'm perfectly fine. Orion treats me like the most beautiful woman in the universe. Please don't let your parents scare him away before the wedding. Also, your father still owes me $50 from poker night in 2046. Don't let him pretend he forgot. I couldn't help it. For the first time in years, I laughed so hard coffee came out of my nose. Then another call arrived. Then another. Then another. My communicator displayed incoming call number 90. I looked toward the peaceful sunrise outside my apartment window and sighed. 6 years of silence had ended because my 82-year-old grandmother had apparently decided that retirement was boring and running away across the galaxy with a handsome alien magician sounded much more entertaining. Knowing my family, this was only the beginning. I honestly considered ignoring every single call and going back to sleep. After all, I'd survived 6 peaceful years by following one simple rule. If my family was involved, walk in the opposite direction. Unfortunately, Grandma had ruined that strategy by making me her emergency contact. 2 hours later I was sitting aboard the fastest civilian shuttle leaving Novaterra, surrounded by enough relatives to qualify as a traveling circus. The silence lasted exactly 14 seconds. Dad stood over the navigation console with his arms crossed. I've calculated the quickest route. My older brother snorted. You got lost in your own garage last month. I was testing the GPS. You drove into Mrs. Henderson's swimming pool. That wasn't my fault. The pool wasn't moving, Dad. Mom buried her face in her hands. I should have stayed home. No, Aunt Linda replied cheerfully. You would have missed the family adventure. Dad glared. This isn't an adventure. My cousin smiled. It kind of is. We're chasing Grandma across 3-star systems because she's dating a magician younger than her youngest grandson. Nobody could argue with that. The pilot announced our first destination. The Celestial Paradise made its last official stop on Moonport Vega. Dad immediately pointed at me. You've got engineering experience. Go question the staff. So I'm the detective now? No. Then why me? Because you're the only one who doesn't yell every 30 seconds. Fair point. Moonport Vega looked exactly like every luxury vacation terminal ever built. Bright lights. Expensive restaurants. Tourists carrying far too much luggage. Alien musicians performing on floating platforms. The cruise company's manager greeted us with the exhausted expression of someone who had already answered the same ridiculous questions all week. You must be Mrs. Eleanor's family. Dad rushed forward. Was she kidnapped? No. Brainwashed? No. Hypnotized? No. Drugged? The manager blinked. Sir, your mother beat 3 security officers in a dance competition before voluntarily leaving. Dad looked confused. She what? The manager activated a holographic recording. There was Grandma. Dancing. Not ordinary dancing. Competitive dancing. Against aliens with 6 legs. Against robots with built-in rhythm processors. Against professional cruise entertainers. She somehow won. The audience cheered wildly. Then Orion appeared wearing a sparkling white performance coat. He dramatically produced flowers from thin air. Grandma rolled her eyes. Then she stole every flower, handed them to random children, and kissed Orion on the cheek. The crowd erupted. My brother slowly lowered his communicator. I don't think she's being held against her will. The manager nodded. She's actually the most popular guest we've had in years. Aunt Linda folded her arms proudly. I always knew Mom was a heartbreaker. Dad looked personally offended. My 82-year-old mother is trending on Galactic Social. The manager smiled. Actually, he enlarged another screen. Grandma had accumulated over 90 million views. One video was titled, Human Grandma Rejects Retirement, Chooses Alien Boyfriend Instead. Another read, Love Has No Age. Apparently. Another, Grandma outsmarts cruise security again. Dad looked ready to faint. While everyone argued over Grandma's unexpected internet fame, someone lightly tapped my shoulder. I turned around. Standing behind me was the most striking woman I'd seen in years. Tall. Silver hair flowing almost to her waist. Soft violet skin that shimmered beneath the terminal lights. Golden eyes. A fitted Navy Customs uniform with an interstellar investigation badge. She looked professional. Confident. Dangerously attractive. You must be the emergency contact. I was beginning to regret answering my phone. She laughed. Actually laughed. Understandable. She offered her hand. I'm Lyra. I shook it. Daniel. I've been assigned to locate your grandmother. Should I apologize in advance? For your grandmother? For my entire family. She glanced toward the waiting area. Dad was loudly accusing an information kiosk of hiding evidence. My brother had somehow gotten into an argument with a snack vending robot. Aunt Linda was asking a street performer whether love spells were tax deductible. Lyra watched everything for several silent seconds. Then she smiled. I've investigated pirate syndicates with less chaos. I'm not surprised. She looked back at me. You don't seem like them. I escaped. I noticed. Before I could answer, Dad shouted across the terminal. Daniel! What? Come tell this robot we're customers. The robot sells sandwiches. It's judging me. It's literally a vending machine. It beeped sarcastically. Lyra covered her mouth to hide another laugh. I'm starting to understand why you disappeared for 6 years. You've only known them 5 minutes. And I already need a vacation. For some reason, that made me laugh harder than anything else that morning. Together we reviewed the cruise's departure logs. Every stop painted the same unbelievable picture. Grandma had entered karaoke contests. Grandma had won a poker tournament against 4 professional gamblers. Grandma had convinced the ship's captain to let her steer during a ceremonial parade. She'd even taught Orion how to play human bingo. Every report described the same thing. Happy. Energetic. Completely in control. One elderly alien passenger even left a testimonial. Eleanor is terrifying. She defeated me at cards, dancing, and arm wrestling. Orion never stood a chance. Lyra smiled while reading it. Your grandmother is famous. Apparently. And adorable. I've never used that word to describe anyone in my family. You might have to start. She leaned closer to another report. This is interesting. What? They didn't leave secretly. I frowned. What do you mean? They announced they were taking a romantic tour across nearby colonies before their wedding. Dad overheard the last word. Wedding? Half the terminal turned to look at him. He didn't care. Nobody approved a wedding. A nearby alien tourist looked confused. I wasn't aware 82-year-olds required parental permission. Several people laughed. Dad did not. Our next clue arrived minutes later. A postcard. Real paper. Grandma always loved old-fashioned things. Across the front was a photograph of Orion standing beside Grandma in front of a beautiful crystal lake on another planet. On the back she'd written, Dear family, stop chasing us unless you're bringing wedding gifts. Orion says your son finally smiled today. I told him miracles happen. Love, Grandma. Lyra looked at me. You smiled? I don't think so. You did. I must have been distracted. She tilted her head with a playful grin. Maybe your grandmother isn't the only one finding unexpected romance on this trip. Before I could think of a reply, my brother came sprinting toward us, covered from head to toe in bright purple slime. The casino's chef says I started an interspecies food fight. Dad sighed. Mom groaned. Aunt Linda pulled out her communicator. Oh, this is definitely going on the family group chat. I looked toward the stars outside the terminal windows and realized something unbelievable. For the first time since leaving home 6 years ago, this disaster wasn't making me miserable. Somehow, chasing an 82-year-old runaway grandmother and her charming alien magician across the galaxy was becoming the strangest and funniest adventure of my life. By the time we reached the floating resort world of Azure Halo, the entire galaxy seemed to know my grandmother's love story. Massive holographic billboards rotated above the docking station. Welcome to the wedding of the season! Below it floated an enormous smiling picture of Grandma wearing a sparkling silver dress while Orion stood beside her in a perfectly tailored white suit, looking less like a magician and more like the cover model for an expensive fashion magazine. Dad stopped walking. No! Mom looked up. Oh no! Aunt Linda smiled proudly. Oh yes! Tourists were lining up beneath the billboard just to take selfies. One little alien child pointed excitedly toward the picture. Mommy! That's the human grandma who beat the pirate champion at karaoke! His mother nodded. And then proposed to the handsome magician. Dad nearly choked. She proposed? Lyra quietly looked at me. I have a feeling your family doesn't know the whole story. I've had that feeling my entire life. The wedding resort looked like something pulled from a fantasy novel. Crystal gardens floated in the air. Waterfalls poured upward into glowing clouds. Music drifted through the air without visible musicians. Alien couples from dozens of civilizations wandered through flower-lined paths while tiny floating drones showered everyone with glowing petals. It was absurdly romantic. It was also completely packed. Apparently an 82-year-old human bride marrying a 29-year-old celebrity magician had become the biggest entertainment story in 3 sectors. The receptionist smiled the moment she saw us. You must be Eleanor's family. Dad leaned across the counter. We're here to stop this wedding. The receptionist checked her schedule. I'm afraid you're a little late. What do you mean? The rehearsal dinner started an hour ago. Dad looked ready to declare war. We followed the directions toward the grand ballroom. Long before we reached the entrance, laughter echoed through the hallway. Real laughter. Happy laughter. When the doors opened, every argument my family had prepared immediately died. Grandma stood in the center of the room wearing a beautiful midnight blue dress. She looked 20 years younger than when I'd last seen her. Her eyes sparkled. Her smile was genuine. She wasn't pretending. She was truly happy. Across from her stood Orion. Instead of performing flashy tricks for attention, he simply watched her with complete admiration. Whenever she spoke, he listened. Whenever she laughed, he smiled before anyone else. He wasn't acting. He was in love. Grandma spotted us immediately. "There you all are!" She marched straight toward Dad. Without warning, she hugged him. Then she smacked the back of his head. "I told you not to panic. You disappeared. I went on vacation. You vanished across 3 star systems. I got upgraded. You got engaged." She grinned proudly. "I certainly did." Dad pointed dramatically at Orion. "He's younger than your youngest grandson." Grandma shrugged. So? He's polite." Dad blinked. "He listens." Dad blinked again. "He cooks." Dad looked increasingly confused. "He laughs at my jokes." Dad finally sputtered. "Mother, that's not the point." Grandma folded her arms. "No, Harold. It is exactly the point." The ballroom became surprisingly quiet. She looked around at the entire family. For 30 years, every conversation with this family involved complaints. Nobody spoke. When your father passed away, everyone kept telling me my adventurous life was over. She smiled toward Orion. Then I met someone who asked me one question. She reached over and gently took Orion's hand. He asked what dreams I still wanted to chase. The room remained silent. I realized nobody had asked me that in decades. Even Dad lowered his eyes. Orion finally spoke. "I didn't fall in love with Eleanor because of her age." He smiled warmly at Grandma. "I fell in love because she has more courage than anyone I've ever met." Grandma squeezed his hand. Then she looked at us again. "I challenged him to a card game." Orion laughed. "She beat me." "I challenged him to dancing." "You won." "I challenged him to climbing Crystal Peak." "You reached the summit before I did." Dad frowned. "So, you weren't chasing her?" Orion looked genuinely offended. "Sir, I spent 2 weeks convincing her to let me buy dinner." Grandma burst into laughter. "I made him earn it." The ballroom erupted with laughter. Lyra leaned closer to me. "I like your grandmother." "I think everyone does." "I can see why." Just then a waiter carrying glowing desserts walked past. My brother grabbed 3. A tiny alien chef immediately chased after him. "Those are decorative." My brother froze. "You mean, they're not edible?" The chef sighed. "They're centerpieces." Everyone watched as my brother slowly placed the glowing desserts back onto the table. Unfortunately, one immediately exploded into harmless glitter. The glitter cannon launched directly into Dad's face. For several seconds he stood completely frozen, covered head to toe in shimmering golden dust. Grandma laughed so hard she nearly needed a chair. "I always knew glitter suited you." Even Dad couldn't stay angry. He started laughing too. As the evening continued, I found myself standing on a quiet balcony overlooking the floating gardens. Lyra joined me with 2 glasses of sparkling fruit juice. "You escaped. Temporary ceasefire." She handed me a drink. "You've changed since we met." "I have?" "When this trip started, you talked about your family like they were a disaster you'd survived." "They usually are." "And now?" I looked through the ballroom window. Grandma was teaching Orion how humans line danced. He was getting every step wrong on purpose just to make her laugh. Mom and Aunt Linda were cheering. Even Dad had reluctantly joined the dance. "They're still exhausting." Lyra smiled. But maybe people can surprise you." She looked at me for a long moment. "You know, you've surprised me too." "How?" "I expected someone bitter. And instead? I found someone kind." Before I could answer, music drifted out onto the balcony. She held out her hand. "One dance?" "I don't dance." "So I've heard." I'm serious. So am I. I hesitated only a second before taking her hand. Neither of us was particularly graceful. We stepped on each other's feet twice. She laughed every time. Somehow that made the awkwardness disappear. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't thinking about why I'd left my family. I was thinking about why I'd come back. Just as the song ended, an elegant alien wearing ceremonial robes climbed onto the ballroom stage and raised both hands for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "tomorrow's wedding preparations are nearly complete." The guests applauded. He smiled while checking a glowing tablet. "There is only one remaining requirement." Everyone waited. By interstellar marriage law, one official family witness must confirm the ceremony. He slowly looked around the ballroom. Then his eyes settled directly on me. "The honor belongs to the bride's chosen grandson." Every head in the room turned toward me at exactly the same moment. Grandma smiled as though she'd planned it from the very beginning. Every pair of eyes in the ballroom stayed fixed on me. Grandma folded her hands together and smiled with the confidence of someone who already knew the answer. "Well?" she asked. I looked around the room. Dad silently mouthed, "Don't do it." Aunt Linda mouthed, "Do it." My brother simply shrugged and grabbed another dessert, this time checking first to make sure it was actually edible. I laughed. "Grandma, you planned this, didn't you?" She placed one hand over her heart in mock innocence. "I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about." Orion grinned. "She absolutely planned it." Grandma winked at him. "Traitor." The officiant politely cleared his throat. "Will you serve as the official witness?" I looked at Grandma. For the first time in years, I wasn't seeing the elderly woman everyone insisted on protecting. I was seeing someone who had chosen happiness without asking permission from anyone. I smiled. "It would be an honor." The ballroom erupted into applause. Dad sighed dramatically. "I've officially lost control of this family." Mom patted his shoulder. "You never had it." The ceremony began just as the twin suns dipped below the floating horizon. Crystal lights illuminated the gardens while hundreds of guests gathered beneath an enormous arch woven from glowing flowers collected from dozens of planets. Alien musicians played instruments unlike anything I'd ever heard, creating melodies that somehow sounded both ancient and joyful. Grandma walked down the aisle without anyone escorting her. She insisted on walking by herself. "I've been walking my whole life," she'd declared earlier. "I'm not starting with training wheels now." Halfway down the aisle she stopped. Everyone wondered why. She looked directly at Dad. "Smile." "I am smiling." "You look constipated." The entire audience burst into laughter. Even Dad couldn't keep a straight face. When Grandma finally reached Orion, he looked at her as though she were the only person in the galaxy. The officiant smiled warmly. "Do you, Orion Valeries, promise to continue making Eleanor laugh every single day?" "I do." "And do you promise never to cheat during cards again?" Orion raised one hand. "I learned that lesson the hard way." Grandma nodded proudly. "He certainly did." The officiant turned toward her. "Eleanor, do you promise not to embarrass your husband too much?" She thought about it. "No." The guests laughed. "I can promise to embarrass him slightly less." "I'll accept that," Orion replied. Their vows weren't dramatic. They weren't filled with impossible promises. Instead, they were wonderfully simple. He promised to keep exploring new worlds with her. She promised to remind him that life should never become too serious. He promised to support every ridiculous idea she ever had. She promised to warn him before acting on at least half of them. By the time they exchanged rings, I realized everyone in the audience was smiling, including my father. As soon as the officiant declared them married, fireworks exploded across the evening sky. Not ordinary fireworks. These became glowing birds before transforming into galaxies and finally into giant laughing faces wearing magician hats. Orion bowed theatrically. Grandma rolled her eyes. "You hired dramatic fireworks? I'm a magician. You are impossible. And yet you married me." She kissed him. The cheering could probably be heard from orbit. The reception was somehow even more chaotic than the wedding. Dad accidentally joined an alien dance circle and couldn't figure out how to leave without insulting anyone. My brother challenged 3 professional performers to a juggling contest, and somehow lost to a 6-year-old alien child. Aunt Linda somehow became the honorary judge of an interspecies karaoke competition despite not speaking a single alien language. Mom laughed so hard she cried when Orion produced 20 bouquets from an empty hat, only for Grandma to immediately hand every flower away to strangers. "See?" Grandma said proudly. "Flowers are prettier when everyone gets one." Later that evening, a small holographic projector appeared in the center of the ballroom. The room became quiet. A familiar elderly man appeared as a blue hologram. Grandpa. The recording had clearly been made years earlier. He smiled directly at Grandma. "My love, if you're watching this, then I probably lost my argument with old age." Grandma's eyes immediately filled with tears. Grandpa continued smiling. "I know you." He chuckled. "You pretend to be stubborn, but you've always had the biggest heart in the room." He pointed playfully toward the audience. "And if our children are standing around arguing instead of celebrating, tell them to stop being so dramatic." Several relatives slowly looked down. Grandpa continued. "If you ever find someone who makes you laugh again." He paused. "Marry the poor fool." The room laughed through its tears. "Life is too short to spend alone." Then Grandpa grinned mischievously. "My only request is that he isn't younger than the dining room table." The entire ballroom exploded with laughter. Grandma wiped away tears while laughing so hard she nearly dropped her glass. "I miss you," she whispered toward the hologram. When the recording ended, Dad quietly walked over to Grandma. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Finally he hugged her. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For thinking I knew what was best for you." Grandma hugged him tighter. "You were trying to protect me. I forgot you never needed protecting." She kissed his forehead. "Now you're learning." Nearby, Lyra found me standing beneath the floating lights. "So," she asked softly, "what happens now? I was supposed to go home tomorrow." "Were?" I smiled. "I requested another week of vacation." "Only a week?" "I figured I'd start there." She laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that." She slipped her hand into mine. This time neither of us pulled away. 6 months later, the entire galaxy was still talking about the wedding. Grandma and Orion had transformed one luxury cruise into the most popular romantic comedy voyage in explored space. Passengers booked trips months in advance just to hear Grandma roast her husband's magic tricks during the nightly shows. Whenever Orion made flowers appear from thin air, Grandma always managed to reveal where he'd hidden them. The audience loved every second of it. Dad eventually admitted Orion was the nicest son-in-law the family had ever gained. Mostly because Orion kept letting him win at cards. Grandma later confessed that Orion was secretly cheating in Dad's favor. "It keeps his confidence healthy," she whispered. My brother was permanently banned from exactly 4 casinos. He still insisted none of it was his fault. Aunt Linda started writing a best-selling travel guide called How to Fall in Love After 80 Without Apologizing. To everyone's shock, it became a bestseller. As for me, I didn't move back home. Some distances are healthy. But I stopped avoiding every family call. Not because they'd suddenly become perfect. Because they'd finally learned to laugh at themselves. Lyra and I kept exploring new worlds together, one adventure at a time. Sometimes we'd visit Grandma and Orion aboard their cruise ship. Every visit ended the same way. Grandma would hug me, point toward the stars, and say, "Never let anyone tell you adventure has an expiration date." Looking back, it was hard to believe everything had started with 89 missed calls in a single hour. I answered expecting tragedy. Instead, I found a family learning how to love better, an unexpected romance of my own, and an 82-year-old grandmother who proved to the entire galaxy that humans never stop chasing happiness. And honestly, if anyone asks me what humanity's greatest superpower is, I won't talk about starships or technology. I'll simply tell them about the fearless human grandmother who ran away with an alien magician, accidentally united her dysfunctional family, and turned the wildest phone call of my life into the happiest ending any of us could have imagined.